How's it going, everybody? This is Craig Peters here from Soundiron, and in today's Soundiron session, we're going to be looking at a track that I wrote in the style of one of my favorite composers, Danny Elfman. I've been a huge Danny Elfman fan for a long time, so this track definitely sort of uses a lot of little Danny Elfmanisms. I mean, I've never really analyzed any of his scores, so all of this stuff is pretty much coming from a self-taught perspective. I've grew up being a really big fan of his music, and I think it was his music for Edward Scissorhands where I really started to put together how the music can really bring out the emotion in the picture. So he's just been a huge influence of mine. I just love his style. I love the little weird things and quirky things that he does. So a lot of that is going to be in this track. So let's go ahead and start checking it out, and then we'll break down the track and show you guys how I wrote it. All right, so that's the track. It's like a short, little, dark, quirky kind of track. You can hear a lot of little, like I'm saying, Danny Elfmanisms, kind of little things that I've taken away, little moves that I've heard in some of his music, and things that I wanted to put together sort of as a track in the style of Danny Elfman, because this isn't really trying to like cop a specific song or anything like that. It's just kind of in the style of and inspired by him. So pretty much the track starts with a very simple melodic thing. It's just taking minor chords and just kind of shifting them around. So if you start with F sharp minor, and then F minor, back to F sharp minor, and then A minor. And pretty much the melody is going to be coming from the brass section, and the strings are just kind of supplying these chords but with tremolos, so you can hear how this sounds, just the strings. I'm going to go ahead and pull this up so you can see. And that's just pretty much supplying the chordal part of this, and then I have the brass coming in, and they're playing the melody and also supplying some of the low end with some of the lower instruments like the tubas and trombones. So going back to the piano, you have this so very simple, and some of the best ways to create melodies is just to kind of arpeggiate and play out the chord. You can really kind of hear it. So it all just kind of flows together, and I thought that sounded cool. It's very simple and just kind of... Sometimes doing something as basic as just taking a single minor chord or major chord and just kind of moving it around can get some really cool sound. And for the strings, I'm using our Hyperion Strings Elements. And the way I have it set up is I'm using the legato This is the pseudo legato that comes with Hyperion Strings Elements. There is true legato for the more long melodic lines, but for the tremolo there isn't, so I'm using the pseudo legato button right here, just so that way I can get those smooth kind of. And then I have each section of the strings from violins, violas, cellos, and basses kind of outlining the full chord. And then during this, in between some of the gaps, I have some harp playing throughout, and I'm using our Elysium Harp. And pretty much what I'm using this for, as you can see, just like whenever the melody kind of plays and there's some space, I'm using the harps to just kind of do these sort of whimsical kind of flowing things in between. So let's check that out. So you can hear it just. So let's hear that with strings. And that kind of stuff always makes me think of Danny Elfman or just other types of more fantasy type tracks where the harp just really kind of adds this like flowy movement of just being able to. You know, that kind of stuff. I think that stuff's really cool and definitely kind of reels you into that fantasy world, I think. And then some of the other instruments we have going on, we have some choir. So let's check that out. And this is using our Olympus Elements. This is the sustains, and then I also have a legato. And then also a legato for the boys choir, the Mercury Elements boys choir. So with the choir sustains, they're pretty much just kind of playing the chords, the three chords that we talked about. And then I'm using the legato Olympus Elements and the legato from the Mercury Boys Choir, just kind of adding a little bit more smoothness, and also they're sort of playing along with the chords too. You can hear it harmonizes. And then with the full choir. So I thought that sounds kind of cool. It definitely reminds me of some earlier Elfman kind of stuff. Like I feel like whenever you're doing some kind of piece like this, you need to add some choir to it. I think that's one of the things I've taken away from a lot of Danny Elfman's music. He definitely likes to use choirs. And percussion-wise, nothing really too much going on. Just some bass, toms, and cymbals. And then I got this Alto Glockenspiel going on. Just outlining the melody. So let's hear that with the brass. And sometimes I like to use melodic percussion like a glockenspiel or a celeste or something like that, just for kind of helps the melody pop out a little bit, just so you know, when you hear something, just, you know, if there's a lot of maybe bigger, warmer instrumentation, something like that really helps the note pop out, and I think an instrument in this context definitely fits. And then that's pretty much it. This is just kind of the intro section, and then section 2 is what I'm calling the Oompa Loompa section. And this, when I say Oompa Loompa, it's just when I think of these kind of like Oompa Loompa, Oompa Loompa. That's just how I think of it. I'm sure there's an actual terminology for it, but that's what I think of when I hear this kind of stuff. So I'm calling this the Oompa Loompa section, so let's go ahead and hear that. go ahead and stop there. So starting from the top, I got some emotional piano, just pretty much laying out the rhythm and pretty much the chordal foundation. And then we got strings. So you can hear how it has this boom, bum, boom, bum, boom, bum. So this part, if you think actually no, it's down here. Like that kind of thing. I have all the instruments playing all the lower parts of the strings. So let's see, let's go ahead and mute that. So we have the basses, they're playing staccatos or spiccatos. And the basses and cellos they're playing the same thing, just cellos are an octave higher. And then I have these other instruments from the strings with the spiccatos and the violas just playing on the upbeats. So if you heard this, so you have that, they're all playing on the upbeat. So it kind of gives it that sort of, that bouncy kind of feel to it. And then let's see what we got going on in the brass. So it starts out with a little rip. And for anyone who's wondering, the brass is all from Symphony Series Brass that we did with Native Instruments. So it starts off with this brass rip. So you can see most of the work on this part is from the strings. Strings are kind of carrying most of the rhythmic part, and the brass is just kind of accenting just to kind of make it a little bit more interesting. Okay, and for this part, so it pretty much started off with the melody being carried by the brass. So now this section, which is the Oompa Loompa section, this is where the melody and the more melodic aspects of the track get sent to the woodwinds. So this is what the woodwinds are doing. Same thing, the lower woodwinds are going to be playing that bum, bum, bum. So, and this was a part of the song that I actually wrote in my head. I was in my car and I heard this kind of, you know, bum 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 bum, and the dun 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 dun, the little melody that you hear. Just kind of heard it, just kind of random. So when I went home, I immediately tried to, you know, write it in, and pretty much just kind of a quirky little fun melody. I don't know exactly what key it's in. It was just very like just trying to kind of play off of the chords. So we had that for the woodwinds, and then we got these little woodwind runs kind of happening right here. So you can see using little runs and embellishments just to kind of make it fun. And then percussion-wise is just, you know, really simple, just accenting stuff. You can hear the alto glock is coming in again, playing off with the woodwinds, but also adding these little, like, you know, fun little chromatic runs. Makes me think of kind of like animation type stuff. And then right here, there's this little, you know, when makes you think of like those animations when you're a kid where you'd see like the little mouse or something running up the stairs and you hear digga 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 digga. I don't know, just kind of makes me think of that sort of stuff. And then around measure 25 is where the choir starts to come back in, and I'm just using these ooh vowels because that's a vowel articulation I've heard a lot in Danny Elfman's music. You just hear this kind of makes me think of like The Simpsons, or, you know, a lot of that kind of stuff. It has ooh has a very sort of creepy vibe to it, so I figured it was an appropriate vowel choice for this track. And then, so at this part, which I'm calling the theme, this is pretty much where it's like the main kind of ending theme sort of thing. So let's check that out. That right there, like when I talk about little like Elfmanisms, I think of that kind of stuff, those little like descending violin runs in groups of 4, when you hear that kind of... If you've listened to Danny Elfman's music, you've probably heard that kind of thing. And it's just pretty much going from legato, these legato melodies, to these little descending runs. And all that's doing is just kind of taking a arpeggio and just doing these little... So really simple, and I can't really play it that well, but it's the beauty of Cubase. You can just program it all yourself. So yeah, that's pretty much it. As far as the brass, let's go ahead and solo the brass on this section. Just kind of want to see what's going on here. Yeah, so we got the trombones and the tubas just kind of, laying down the root note and just adding some weight to the track. So for the trumpets, just to kind of add a little bit of that brass flair to it, because most of the work is going to be coming from the woodwinds and the strings. So I just wanted the brass to just kind of be laying down, holding down the low end and just adding a little bit of, spice just to kind of make the whole overall orchestration interesting, hopefully. So with the brass, it's just doing, or the trumpets are just doing these little... just playing off of the chords, and when you hear it in context, so you got the strings going boom, no, 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 and then you got the brass the trumpet parts, bum, 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 bum. So it's just kind of playing off of the rhythm a little bit. And let's see, let's listen to the woodwinds and the strings together. So yeah, the flutes are also doing those little little runs, and I have these really high so that way they kind of pop. Like if you would use like a piccolo or something, really high and piercing, just to kind of add to the strings to give it color, and just to add another layer to it, really, so it's not just strings. And then let's play it with strings. So just kind of having the orchestra play together a little bit. Percussion-wise, just kind of... So you see, like, with the other lower instruments, the bum, 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 the percussion is just kind of double timing it a little bit, so that way it kind of builds the excitement a little bit more. And then, yeah, let's hear all this all together. And that's pretty much it. And as far as the mastering goes, for anyone who's interested, pretty much what I did is I have a fab filter, Q3, and all this is really doing is just kind of filtering out, some of the different low end and low mids and boosting a little bit of the highs. So let's go ahead. I'm going to bypass this and then enable it so you can hear what it's doing. So you can see by scooping out some of the low mids and just doing a little bit of high passing and a little bit of low passing and boosting, just kind of carving it out a little bit to just make it sound a little bit more high fidelity, a little bit more clear. And then after that, we got the SSL G comp, and all this is doing is just kind of, as they say, gluing the mix together a little bit. So I have the attack on 30, the release on auto, and then I just adjust the threshold until I get to, somewhere around 2 or 4 or in between here. That's usually where I try to sit. So let's go ahead and... So like around there, just where it's kind of floating and just kind of touching the mix a little bit, nothing too hardcore. You have to be careful with these. If you increase the threshold too much, you'll start to hear this like kind of really heavy pumping, or it sounds like your mix is kind of choking a little bit, so you have to be a little bit cautious on how hard you use it. And then I have the virtual tape machine. These are some settings that I stole from Nelly Getgood, who's a metal mixer. Pretty much, you know, I just kind of have it sitting on here just to add a little bit of something. I mean, some people tend to not want to use tape machines, some people do. I thought it'd be kind of cool just to give it a little bit of that tape feel, I guess. And then for my limiter, I'm using the Waves L3, and I have the out ceiling at 0.4, and then just kind of brought the threshold down till I hit the level that I wanted. So without it, just kind of boosting it up a little bit to get that kind of, you know, that level that everyone wants. And yeah, that's pretty much it. All right, so that about wraps it up for this Soundiron session. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This was a really fun track to write because like I said, I'm a big Danny Elfman fan, and you know, this kind of music is sort of the fun orchestral stuff I like to write on my own time. So, you know, it's kind of cool to show you guys a little bit of my approach. And you know, like I said, I'm self-taught, so all this stuff is pretty much just from using my ear and picking out some of the little different moves and things that he does and using it in my own context. So. Thank you guys so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't, like this video if you dig it, and we will see you in the next one. Take care.